Thompson, and this is Austin Faith Dialogue.
There are prophets of doom today who believe that the glory has departed from America. I do not believe that.
This man was considered by many the leader of the religious political right during the 1980s. He's still a strong voice for those who champion political conservatism and the belief that Christian values need to be held by those running for political office. Today on Austin Faith Dialogue, we ask the question if there truly is a religious political right and its impact on society. Please join us.
This is Austin Faith Dialogue, a public affairs program discussing the important crossroad of religion in life, produced by Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KTBC TV. Austin Faith Dialogue highlights the interaction of the religious community with the social and cultural issues throughout our area. Now, today's edition of Austin Faith Dialogue.
This nation's Constitution and the Bill of Rights makes several guarantees. The first is the freedom of speech. Another is the belief of our founding fathers that there should be a separation of church and state. But while we cherish the former, we often debate the latter. Much of the debate on the second issue comes from those who hold a political conservative philosophy that believes conservative Christian values are needed in politics today. It's called by some the religious right. But does it really exist? And if it does, what effect is it having on the political agenda and the debate of the 1990s? We hope to discover some answers today. And to begin, we asked producer Roger Lotz and cameraman Tracy Poe to look at the issue.
Richard, for many, the religious right became apparent after Ronald Reagan won the presidency in 1980. During that decade, the Reverend Jerry Falwell was considered its leader through his organization, the Moral Majority. However, in researching this topic, we discovered that those who study the effect of religion on our society would argue if there truly is such a thing as a religious right. But to some, the religious right does exist, and it possesses a real political fear. So much so that in January of this year, in the church behind me, First Methodist Church in Austin, a forum was held on the topic. We have taken these differing viewpoints and put them all together to answer two basic questions. One, is there such a thing as the religious right? And two, what is its mission?
Darkness is so dark today, and the contrast is so real. And families are awakening to the fact that we're in serious, serious trouble as a nation. And parents who love their children have got to react to the society and the atmosphere and the environment. And we've got to stand up in the Lord and make a difference. And the only hope, as I see it, is in two institutions. The Christian home, the Christian family that the quartet sang about, and the Bible-believing and preaching local church. These are the only two institutions that are not owned by the New Agers and the abortionists and the feminists and the libertarians and the atheists and, yes, even the government. These are the only two agencies that have any hope of leading this country out of its morass of problems and degradation. We're mourning in America today. The past 90 days have been traumatic days for this country. Things have happened so quickly and so unbelievably that we have difficulty digesting the seriousness of the problems we're facing. We are paganizing our country. We don't want to talk about Thanksgiving and how it began. We don't want to talk about the Pilgrims and the Puritans and the revivals in New England. We don't want to talk about the Jonathan Edwards and the Timothy Dwights and the founding fathers of this country who almost unanimously were committed to the biblical principles that we call the Judeo-Christian ethic. We don't want to acknowledge that this is a Christian nation. And unfortunately, in the last 90 days, our president has even contributed to the spiritual and moral demise of our country, joining in concert with groups like the ACLU and Planned Parenthood and NOW and the NEA, the National Education Association, and so many others who believe that America is best served and her children and families best served by eliminating God from the fabric of the country.
There is certainly nothing wrong with anybody from any religion running for or seeking any public office, whether they be Christian, Buddhist, Muslim, Catholic, Jew. That is absolutely everybody's privilege, and that's one thing wonderful about this country, that we don't have a religious test for office. Unfortunately, I think we're sliding to maybe having a religious test, and that is one of the side effects that is coming out of this that certainly does alarm me.
They have had a lot of successes politically in getting books and art censored and so on, and they are becoming better and better and better at what they're doing.
I'm not sure there is in the sense that a lot of people use the term. Plainly, there are people with serious religious beliefs who are culturally conservative, who are politically conservative, and for whom their religion is much more central to their lives than it is for a lot of people, so that their religious views informs their political views and their views on daily life. So in that sense, there's a group that can be called, a number of groups that can be called religious right. They are religious and politically they are on the right.
There is indeed going on in our society what one journalist has called a culture war. And it's a very basic kind of war. And some evangelicals insist that conservative Christians are doing in the 80s and 90s only what liberal Christians did in the 1960s. And there's some real validity to that. My point has to do with the cosmopolitan press, elite press, very well educated, almost totally in their basic precepts secular, who do not appreciate the abiding power of religion in our society.
But if you mean by that, is there some sort of dangerous conspiracy out there? No. There are people who are American citizens exercising their free speech rights to express their views on issues just like the rest of us do.
If you ask a journalist today, how is American culture most different from European culture? It would take days before they would come up with the answer I would give. And that answer would be, we are still a religious nation.
Life might be a great deal harder for lesbians and gays, or for women who need abortions, or maybe children in schools would be exposed to religious instruction if some of the people on the religious right won on all their issues. We may not like all the outcomes, but there's a great deal of disagreement internally among the people who are religious and conservative. There are political disagreements, there are religious disagreements. I think it's a real mistake to treat all these people as a single block.
So you don't have religious editors who are aware of all the complexities of American religion? They don't take it seriously, only when some crazy person does something. And when religion is discussed, it's always discussed in some personality. Someone does something. Madeleine Murray O'Hair does something, or Jimmy Swaggart does something. That's when they want to talk about it. There is in our midst today a politically active conservative Christianity that is new in our culture. There's no doubt about that.
I think both sides have been trying to win a national knockout victory on abortion.
In one sense, in the case of the Southern Baptist Convention, it is in fact creating a new religious denomination, because Baptists used to insist upon separation of church and state as being one of their cardinal defining elements. Well, under the aegis of the conservatives taking over the denomination, they want to be very politically active, as a matter of fact, and they want to grab a hold of the state and to wrench it into the ways of godliness as defined by them.
The religious right is utterly dependent upon the secular humanist left, and the secular left is utterly dependent upon the religious right. And if Jerry Falwell didn't exist, the left would have had to invent him, and vice versa.
We're going to take a short break, and when we come back on Austin Faith Dialogue, we'll discuss and debate the question of the so-called religious right with our two guests. a pastor who does her work at First United Methodist Church in Austin, and a local radio talk show host who works at a station that calls itself Austin's only Christian information radio. Stay with us.
Serving Austin means serving you. That has always been the primary goal of Austin Metropolitan Ministries. We are religion in action through the work of these organizations. Each plays a key role in making the capital city a better place to live, but we can't do it alone. Do you have some spare time, talents, or any resources that you can share? If you do, please call AMM at 472-7627, because serving Austin means serving you.
The topic for today's edition of Austin Faith Dialogue is the question of the religious right. We're now joined by our guest. The Reverend Bobby K. Jones is an associate minister at the First United Methodist Church in Austin. The church broadcasts its services each Sunday to Austinites and is considered a leader and projects as a trendsetter in the Austin community.
But on a stand.
We're also joined by local radio talk show host Colin Lambert. Each afternoon, Lambert promises to tell Austinites the way things should be in Washington and here in Austin on a station that calls itself Austin's only Christian information radio. We thank you for being with us. And I think we'll give you a chance, first of all, Colin, to say whether you're telling it like it should be.
Well, as I mentioned, I may not be Rush Limbaugh. In fact, I'm probably to the right of Rush Limbaugh, but yeah, I think I'm telling it like it should be, and I'm giving some people in this town a voice that they have not had for a long time, a perspective that they have not had for a long time in the media, especially in radio in this town, and addressing many of the issues I'm sure we'll touch on today.
Well, one of the issues that was touched on in the video package was whether there is such a thing as the religious right. How do you come down on that?
Well, I think there's definitely a group of people that are conservative, that have strong Christian and conservative beliefs, and they have been dubbed the religious right. I don't know that we can truly define the religious right. I think different people would fit into that category depending on who you talk to, which expert you talk to. I think that's really going to be the difference. But I think there's a group in this country that have strong conservative Christian beliefs that are making an impact on the communities around them as well as the nation as a whole.
Okay. So how do you respond to that, Bobby K.? Do you think that it's a legitimate category to have as the religious right?
Well, we talked earlier about wondering where that term religious right came from, and were unable to clarify that. I certainly believe the religious right, that term, functions as an umbrella over hundreds, perhaps thousands of individual groups, not just churches, but other organizations that share common vision for our country, nationally as well as locally. So yes, I believe there is a force in America today that we can call the religious right.
Well, one of the things that's for sure, there are such organizations as Pat Robertson's the Christian Coalition, founded in 1988, which is organizing churches and religious folks otherwise in political action groups. And I think that's one of the things that is certainly clear to focus upon, and the impact of that, and the issues that are connected with that. I suspect, Colin, you say that you're to the right of Rush Limbaugh. Do you see that that this is like a crusade that needs to be carried on in our society?
Well, I don't know if it's a crusade. I think for those who believe what I talk about in the afternoons and who support what people would dub the religious rights views, I think for them and for me personally, it is a relationship with Christ that drives me to do that, to share with people my personal beliefs, and to share with them what I feel like is important to get this nation to where it ought to be. I don't know if it's a crusade across the nation, but personally, I think it starts with each individual and their feeling that they want to be the people who affect their family members rather than outside influences affecting their families in a negative way, in a different way than they would like.
Do you have any question about the need for that in your mind, for that kind of conviction?
Oh, absolutely not. Each one of us, as we have experienced Christ in our own lives and live our lives in the Christian faith, should, I think we are obligated, as Colin says, should live that out in our relationships with others and express that politically as well. My concern is not that Colin expresses himself and even tells everyone how he thinks it ought to be. I think he should do that. My concern is when Colin or whomever want to tell me how I should be different and conforming to his understanding of God and of the Bible. And I personally have experienced in the past couple of years the result of absolutism on the part of others who want to tell me how I am immoral and wrong.
You felt a judgmental spirit in that regard.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I was just going to respond to that and say, I mean, it's unfortunate that that happens, and I think you're going to find that in any movement, if you will, people who are doing things they shouldn't be doing. And let me, if I'm representing the religious right today, let me apologize for anybody that has treated you like that. That's unnecessary and uncalled for. But the thing that she brought up about where she doesn't want people forcing those views and opinions on her, that's the way those who are called the religious right feel that society is doing. We put children in public schools, and humanism and in some cases grand sexuality and other things are being forced on our children without us having anything to do with it, without us having any way to stop it. We've removed religion from the school, and now other religions, humanism, atheism, evolutionism, all of those are being forced on our children without us having an opportunity to do anything about it. And that's where I say enough is enough.
Okay. Do you think that that's something that you could understand, that they feel like people are forcing their views on them in terms of their conviction?
And I think we just have different experiences or interpretations of what's going on here. There is no way that a Christian parent can be kept from teaching his or her values to their children. There's just no way that can happen. You have the child in the home, you have your church, you have all of the resources that your faith allows you to bring to bear in teaching your children. You cannot be kept from doing that.
Okay.
And so I don't see that is what is happening. Public schools exist for all of the children, not just the Christian children.
Well, you know, one of the things that came out in Jerry Falwell's presentation earlier was, he said that this is a Christian nation.
Exactly. He said that.
Is, are we a Christian nation? I mean, is this a valid way of looking at our society when we've got, obviously, people of so many other different faith groups?
We were a Christian nation. We're no longer a Christian nation, is my opinion.
The Native Americans were not.
I think if you look at the Founding Fathers, George Washington said, "True religion affords government its surest support. The future of this nation depends on the Christian training of the youth. It is impossible to govern without the Bible."
Okay. Well, it's impossible for us to go on at this point because we need to take another break. But we're going to come back and we'll continue our debate on the so-called religious right, and stay tuned.
Sister.
Serving Austin means serving you. Each day, Austin Metropolitan Ministries is religion in action, providing affordable housing, caring for the elderly, marching against hunger, and much more. AMM promotes understanding, cooperation, and social involvement. So when we ask for your help, we're really asking to help you, Austin. To find out how you can help Austin Metropolitan Ministries help Austin through its member organizations, just call 472-7627.
It doesn't matter whether you're on the left or the right. If your group is financially dependent upon direct mail fundraising, then you have to have a devil and a conspiracy on the other side.
And when you look at what the kinds of the true viciousness of the campaigns in Oregon and Colorado this year, you get some sense of the very fundamental kinds of hatreds that and prejudices that are involved here.
We're back on Austin Faith Dialogue with our guest Colin Lambert of KIXL Radio and the Reverend Bobby Kay of First United Methodist Church. I think that Bobby Kay, if you would like to have a chance to respond just before the break, we were talking about whether this is a Christian nation or not. You had something to say, and let's give you a chance to make that input.
Oh, this is one of those things I was asking Colin to help me understand. I too believe we need to be in dialogue, those of us who purport to be on different sides of this issue, and I cannot understand how anyone can say this is a Christian nation. The Native Americans who were here first obviously were not Christian, although deeply and passionately religious, and we're full as a society of people of all faiths. Every faith on the globe is present here today.
Society,
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think that one of the things that was just brought out in this last series of images that we had was the issues that in Colorado, Oregon, there was the vote about homosexual rights, and I think that there's no doubt that the religious right, we'll call it that at this point, has had an impact. The people for the American Way that have been critical of the religious right and the Christian Coalition of Pat Robertson, they agree that in the last election, the 40% of the attempts to be placing people on school boards and on city councils and library boards and so on by the organized religious coalitions worked, had an effect. I think that's an agreed upon fact, and the question is, how do we feel about that? And how is that relating to the kind of pluralism that you were talking about? I think that there's no question everyone has a right to be involved in political activity of whatever political persuasion. The question is, what about forcing one's views or values on others in the society? That's the political question. How do you feel about, for instance, from the political side, Colin, I'll give you a chance to respond to what was in the Christian Century. In Southern California, a religious right organizer was asked, how do you eat an elephant? And the answer was, one bite at a time, in terms of what is perceived by some in the Republican Party as an attempted takeover. How would you respond to that?
I don't know if there's any takeover going on. I think of any party in the country right now, the two major ones are the developing third one or whatever other ones might be there. The Republican Party has for quite some time represented the views of Christians the best. Unfortunately, it seems to be even moving farther away from that right now, especially after this last election. And, you know, I agree that everybody ought to have a right to run for office and to voice their views and to take their ideology into office. I mean, and the times that I seem to be offended the most is when other groups act like they don't have an agenda. I don't deny that I don't have an agenda, but the other groups act like we have an agenda. You better watch out for the religious right. Well, all the other groups have agendas too.
Sure.
And I have as much right to put forth my agenda as anybody else does.
Right.
Part of my experience, Colin, is that some individuals in the religious right, and not just some, you said it was unfortunate that some people treated me badly. In fact, those people were instructed to treat me badly by mass mailings that went out across the state. A very coordinated effort of misinformation about me personally. So it's hard to say just a couple of people. My problem is when members of the religious right do not come clean with their agenda, and I think this happens over and over again when people present themselves as just a parent or just a citizen. I've had people say this to me over and over again who are there at the bequest of the American Family Association, Concerned Women for America, Eagle Forum, any of these organizations. I just say, tell me who you are. You know, I'd be glad to tell you who I am.
And that
you
works
just
both
tell me
ways.
who you are.
That works both ways. So if someone is working for the homosexual agenda, they should make it known up front, I'm working for the homosexual agenda. If that's the way it's going to be across the board, I agree with that.
And there is a manual for the takeover of the Republican Party by the religious right, precinct by precinct.
There's lots of manuals.
So
there's manuals for getting into the public schools with all types of sexuality programming. It's called SECUS. And we've had to fight that here recently as well.
Yes,
so.
that is what I'm most familiar with.
How do you feel about that?
How do I feel about what?
This SIECUS.
How do I feel about SIECUS? Well, SIECUS is merely a set of guidelines which was put together by people from across the United States. It is not a curriculum. It has never been, and I repeat, never been put forward as the curriculum to be used in the state of Texas. And this is the kind of scary information that organizations have used to terrify parents that they were going to send their 5-year-olds to school and be recruited by homosexuals.
I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that at all.
But you have an issue with SIECUS as otherwise?
Oh, sure. Well, the guidelines mean you find a curriculum that fits within those guidelines. Well, the guidelines start at 5 years old, teaching children very graphic information. And they call it age appropriate, but what is age appropriate to this teacher may not be age appropriate to this parent. And I think that's what the concern is. I don't think they're the ones that should be determining what is age appropriate for our children.
Well, I think that we have a whole series of issues under the heading of sexuality. Sex education in schools, homosexuality, abortion. Are there other issues that you feel strongly about that need to be, from your standpoint, set forward? I mean, in your radio show, do you have other issues that you're particularly concerned about besides those?
Yeah, we deal with a lot of issues. I mean, we deal with politics, we deal with religious issues. I mean, I just host a talk show. We talk about everything, whatever the topic of the day is, that's what we do. You know, yesterday we spent a lot of time talking about the issue of who to vote for in an election where many of our listeners are pro-life, and we now are faced with electing one of 2 pro-choice people to our state Senate seat. And that's something that is very difficult to many of our listeners, and we discussed that at length yesterday. I do want to throw in one thing from the beginning, and that was the leader of our thing being portrayed as Jerry Falwell or as Pat Robertson.
Right.
I don't think those 2 men necessarily represent the views of all these people. I disagree with both of them on many areas.
Okay, so there's no monolith.
Right, that's exactly right.
Okay, Bobby Kay, in the minute that we have left, do you feel that it's appropriate for religious organizations to be doing political organizing?
The Bible is political. Issues of justice and fairness and food for hungry people have, in our society, been political for a long, long time.
So I think that being the separation of church and state doesn't mean that people don't get involved. And we are sorry to say that we can't get involved any further in this discussion today, but we're going to end with a word of appreciation to the Reverend Bobby K. Jones and Colin Lambert for being with us to discuss the topic of the religious right. We also want to thank you for taking the time to watch the show. Please join us again next week for another edition of Austin Faith Dialogue. Until then, I'm Richard Thompson, and peace be with you.